Well, I really appreciate John doing the devotional a little bit ago. Um, I didn't appreciate him telling me not to eat sugar cookies, but wait, he didn't tell me not to eat sugar cookies, not to be a sugar cookie, something like that. But no, John's one of those kind of guys. The more you talk to him, you just know, man, this is a really interesting guy, and I've always appreciated get to know him a little bit better. Appreciate his thoughts tonight. Tonight we're in Joshua chapter 3. Just to remind you where we are, the children of Israel have been wandering in the wilderness. They're 40 years. They're now ready to enter the promised land. Moses has passed. Joshua is leading. And they sent 2 spies in to spy out Jericho. And we looked at last week how they went in and Rahab hid them and protected them. And because of that, there's this agreement there with the scarlet cord so that would protect her and anyone in her house when the children of Israel come back there to Jericho. So at the end of Joshua chapter 2, we saw where the 2 men returned. Verse 23, they came down from the hills. That sounds like something we would refer to. They came down from the hills and passed over and came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and they told him all that had happened to him. And they said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also to the inhabitants. All the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us." So this time there was a positive report. There were several things contained in that report. One was the confidence that God was going to give them those lands, that land, but also that the people there were intimidated because of them. And so that brings us to Joshua chapter 3. We looked at the first verse just briefly last week, but let's go ahead and dive in all this. Is Jeremy in here tonight? Oh, yeah, there you are. You offered to read last week when we cut you off, so how about you jump in and read the first 9 verses for us, and we'll get someone else to do the last ones.
Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out for Acacia Grove and came to the Jordan. He and all the children of Israel lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, or you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before." Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." And Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, "Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people." So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. He shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, When you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan." So Joshua said to the children of Israel, "Come here and hear the words of the Lord your God."
All right, someone else pick up there, verse 10 through the end of the chapter.
Joshua said, "By this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore, take for yourselves 12 men from the tribe of Israel, one man from every tribe. And it shall come to pass, as
right. I apologize. I wish I had maybe tried to search and find some pictures of the Jordan River when it's overflowed its banks. But sometimes I think we think of a small little stream or something when we talk about the Jordan River. But here we find where this great miracle occurred, and it certainly was one of those special moments in the children of Israel's lives. And this chapter is one of those keystone moments of the Old Testament, really one of those key times and key landmark events of the children of Israel. And sometimes I think we pass over it and don't recognize it. So let's dive in. We've read the chapter. We see kind of what's happened here. We see the miracle that's happened. As we go through, let's notice a few of the lessons that we can learn from it. One that we mentioned last week is how chapter 3, verse 1 started, and that is to be ready to act immediately. They didn't sit around and wait forever. When Joshua got this report, this positive report from the two spies, we see then Joshua rose early in the morning. They set out. And so we need to be ready to act. Sometimes I feel Satan tries to, no matter what good it is that we're trying to do, sometimes he wants us to sit back and think about more, or sit back and just delay or procrastinate. My grandfather used to say, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. Save it for next week. But for some reason, he had these corny sayings, and some reason that's always stuck in my mind. But that's on purpose that he said that, because he knew it would stick in my mind. But the point is to not procrastinate on things, and Satan wants us to procrastinate. They've been waiting 40 years, and he wanted them to wait that much longer. But Joshua got up early in the morning and acted. The second point I have down here is make sure God goes before you in a new endeavor or new territory. So notice what the officers did in verse 2. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp. And it's a little confusing to me, a little bit of the timeline on this. We're told back in chapter 2, 3 days, but we also find that the spies were gone. They hid basically in the wilderness for a couple days too. So sometimes the way Joshua is written, it kind of tells you part of the story, and then it comes back and tells you some more again. So sometimes that timeline is a little difficult to follow. But the people did say, the officers did say in verse 3, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. And here's this principle that we should have, is to make sure that God goes before us in any new endeavor, in any new task. Sometimes new tasks are scary. New tasks are intimidating. Sometimes there's health things that we haven't been through before, and those can be intimidating. Sometimes new jobs, new opportunities. Sometimes meeting new people can even be intimidating. But especially when we're starting off major things, we need to make sure that God goes before them. This was this principle that, was being established with the children of Israel. You had the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant represented what? God's with them, God's presence there. And so the idea is to put God with them, let God lead them throughout any of their journeys. And the same thing should go with us. Sometimes I'm afraid when we go out in our journeys, sometimes we may leave God. How about when we go on vacation? Do we leave God behind, or do we find that vacation's a time to connect with God even more? What do we do as we go off into our new territories? Hiram mentioned in this sermon Sunday that the brief prayer. He talked about that just real briefly. About saying a brief prayer, even something as simple as responding to a question, consulting God for advice in that. We need to make sure God goes before us. The third thing here is to be willing to take initiative. Notice what the officers told the people. As soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. So he's basically saying, when you see it, then you set out. You take initiative. When you see it, you take initiative. There are some people that go all throughout their life always doing what someone else tells them to do. Some people are that way. This is one of those examples where they were told, when you see it, you set out from your place. Now, part of that is because it's so many of the people. It's thousands of people. And so as the ark was coming through, then they were to set out from their place. And not everybody would see it at once. The fourth thing, consecrate yourselves before big tasks. I should have mentioned a little bit more about this. One thing in verse 4, they're supposed to keep a distance between them and the ark, about 2,000 cubits in length. Somewhere I read that this was like 0.57 miles roughly. 10 football fields, okay. Pretty good ways. So why do you think that was? Respect for the Ark of the Covenant. It makes really the situation later with Uzziah basically come to make a little more sense. Sometimes we think, well, he was trying to stabilize the ark and that sort of thing, but here this was the principle to have utmost respect for the ark. And that's exactly what Joshua tells them here in verse 5. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So really verses 4 and 5 teach this principle of utmost respect, but not just respect for the Ark of the Covenant, our respect for God. It was Also, this idea of consecrating themselves before a big event, making sure they were holy before that event. They were about to be used by God. Hiram spoke in one of his lessons Sunday morning about being holy and the importance that we have, the teaching that we have to be holy. And there's something to be said that we should consecrate ourselves. Yes, we should live holy lives, but there's something to be said before big tasks, to spend time in prayer and fasting and cleaning up things. You know, one of my daughters was encountering something at work recently and was torn really what to do, and something was persisting, and she felt like she needed to talk to a supervisor. And she knew what was going to happen if she did. It was going to mean that another individual was going to have pressure put on them. Well, it just so happened that that supervisor also was being watched by another person higher up from them. And so now there's this situation where two things were happening at the same time. And my advice was, well, you need to make sure you fly straight over the next period of time. Don't be late. Make sure you're on time. Make sure you're doing everything you need to do because you know you're going to be under more scrutiny because now you've reported this and what you've done the thing that you felt like you needed to do, but sometimes that comes back around to you. The whole point I'm trying to make, we should live holy lives, absolutely, but sometimes there is the idea before big decisions to do extra, if you will, consecration. I think the Bible teaches that when it comes to selecting elders in a congregation. There's other times when we're told to fast and pray before certain things. And in our lives, maybe there's a big decision that is coming up on you that the same principle would do us good to make sure that we're cleansing ourselves, we're totally reliant on God, that we're focused on His will, that we're focused on His guidance, and making sure that we're going right by His will before that happens. All right, the next point, well, that's repeating that. The next lesson that I want to point out is have faith in what God can do with and among you. Notice verse 5. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So here's Joshua telling the people, God's going to do wonders among you. Isn't that an empowering statement that Joshua was telling the people? You watch out because God's going to do wonders among you. I think that's an empowering statement that sometimes parents can give their kids, that leaders can give employees to express confidence that God is working in them, through them. I think that's confidence that we should see that God is working. Sometimes I think we fail to see where God is working in our lives. Joshua is calling them out that he has confidence that God's going to do wonders among them here that when they set out. And he had confidence in that. The next item is Russell.
Well, I think you could take that same statement and example and apply it right here, not very far from each one of those. All you have to do is look, well, you don't have to look real hard to see what God's doing right here, I think. There's members of Satan. People are praying, people, their lessons, studies being set up, and people are being converted. That's, I think, critical to membership, allowing God to work through them. Modern that.
And when those things happen, we give God the glory for that, because we see His power working in those things, and we see that happening. The next item is how do we know others? How do others know we have been with Christ? Notice verse 7. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you." I underline that they may know that. I just caused that to basically step back and think about that. God's telling Joshua, today I'm going to start to exalt you, but here's the reason why. So that they will know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. So basically what he's saying is, after this, the children of Israel are going to know clearly that God was with Joshua. The question is, do people know that that God's with us? Do people know that?
People respond positively to good leadership. These people have obviously knew Moses was not with them. A new leader was being chosen, and to validate God's choice as leaders, he's going to perform this great miracle in front of them, and they're going to know that Joshua was chosen because he is a leader. And if we stand out amongst our peers, it's because we lead in a particular way. And they see that. That person doesn't curse. He talks in ways that are not common amongst most other workforce, so to speak. And that he stands out, or she stands out. Because it's like a bright light to shine in.
So the purpose is not to elevate that person. It's not to elevate one of us. The purpose is so that others will know that we're trying to walk with God.
Remember that leadership of Christ is servanthood.
That's right.
You'll serve others, help others, try to be there, as you said earlier, when there's a need. That's unlike what the world does.
It is unlike it.
You'll find out that people don't know their neighbor. And if you'll be a neighbor, then they'll be reflecting on something that's different than the world shows.
That's right. we'll bring that point up again here in just a few more verses when we talk a little bit more about reminders. But you're right. We need those reminders. God is saying He's going to begin to exalt Joshua, and He's going to do that not just to exalt him, but to exalt him so that others would know clearly that God was with him. The next item I put down, we should be willing to take charge when there's a need. This came from basically verse 8. As for you, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant. Basically, there was this need of the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant. They were to take charge. Joshua was to take charge. He was to step up. He was to step up, tell them what to do. The priests were to step up, bear the Ark of the Covenant before all the people. And then number 8 here, how do you personally know that God is living among you? And this kind of goes with this general principle that we've been talking about. Joshua said to the people of Israel, verse 9, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. In verse 10, and Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that He will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. And basically, before they're stepping into the Jordan River, the people still don't know what's going to happen. Here's Jordan River overflowed its banks. They're all walking toward it. Joshua's telling them, here's how you're going to know that God is among you. But to this point, how do we know that God is living among us? Do we see it? Russell just mentioned, we can see it here in this congregation. I hope not only do you see it in this congregation, I hope you see it in your family, in your family's lives. I hope you see it in your life where God is working. Sometimes it's hard to see that when you're looking at the present. It's much harder to see it looking at the future, but we should be able to see it looking back. We should be able to see where God has been there in our lives. Sometimes it's through unanswered prayers. Sometimes it's even through no's. Sometimes it's through disappointments. Sometimes it's through health scares or whatever. But we should be able to look back in our lives and see clearly where God has been working, not in a miraculous way like He did here with the Jordan River, but in a way that is clearly evident. Russell?
Well, I think most of us, it's got a little age on us, that looking back, we can see where God, through providence, worked through other people and through us to accomplish things. And hopefully our children can see that, and it helps their faith grow, but it sure would make our faith grow to make decisions with God in the future
right.
We want to have that kind of faith. He works in our lives and lives around us every day.
Well, you mentioned something that we'll dive into next week. You mentioned tell that to your children. That's one of the principles that will be driven home next week. Let's see. All right. The next item is involve all. Don't just do it yourself. Verse 11, behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into Jordan. Now, therefore, take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe of man. And so here, no doubt, one of the reasons why he wanted 12 men is to involve someone from each of the tribes. And I think that's a good leadership principle there. Verses 15 and 16, God keeps his promises. Here, they're told in verse 13, and when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So here's Joshua. He's gathered the people. He's saying, come listen to what God's saying. He's saying, this is what's going to happen. As soon as these priests carry the ark, the waters are going to stop. And then what happens in 15 and 16? That's exactly what happened. The waters stop. I don't know how this happened. I can't picture in my mind how it happened. But as soon as their soles, the feet of the priests bearing the ark, verse 15, were dipped into the brink of the waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away. So that it just happened a time where as soon as their feet touched, okay, it backed up back there. But how long does it take that water to get dry where it just stops? I don't know. It's just one of those miracles that the more you think about it, it just puzzles me how that happened. The only way it could be was God, and rose in a heap very far away. But here it's clear that God keeps his promises. And along those same lines, God will make a way to do his will. Sometimes God does the impossible. He makes the impossible seem easy. And I hope you've seen it in your life sometimes, that there's just no possible way that this is going to happen. I hope Roger doesn't mind me embarrassing him, but Roger said tonight, I just remember visiting Devin in the hospital maybe a year ago and didn't think he would make it. And he had a successful surgery, and and it's good to see him come this far. And we see powerful things happen. He finds a way to do his will. And then the last point here is the leader makes sure that the followers are safe. And this is repeated. So chapter 4 kind of repeats chapter 3 a little bit, but elaborates just a little bit more. But now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. And again, it was dry ground. A little homework for next week. Just sit back and maybe if you want to just go off memory or go back to Exodus and read the story of the children of Israelites going through the Red Sea, just make you a little list. What are some of the similarities of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea and crossing the Jordan? And then what are some of the differences between the two? There's several in both categories, but I think it's a good exercise for us to do that. But just a little spoiler. Look at verse 24 of chapter 4. Why did all this happen? So that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So why are these things written for us? Is that we can clearly know that God's in control. Here's the fact. Sometimes Satan wants us to doubt and even wonder, is God even there? Does he even hear our prayers? Does he listen to us? Is he really there? Can I trust the Bible here, what it said? I think the more we dive into the Word and we see that God was clearly there, there's no other explanation for these things other than God. The more we see that through His Word, and then we see things happen in our lives, the more it gives us reassurance and confidence that yes, God is there. And here's what's important, I think, with our young people, because, at the age when our young people will go from being under our roofs, some kids it's teens, some kids it's late teens, some it's early 20s, some it's mid-20s. They go through this period of doubt and wondering, and when their faith is going from being their mom and dad's to being their own, and them really owning that faith. I think if we're honest, all of us go through a period of time where we question and we wonder those things. What I think is important is for all along the way for us to be teaching our kids and showing our kids where God has been active in our lives, where we're telling those stories of how God pulled us through, of how maybe something happened where we were praying for one thing and God didn't answer that, but we see later why, boy, God had that right. I had it all wrong. I wanted this to happen, and that was the wrong thing that was the worst thing that could have happened. And there's a reason why this other thing happened, because God had a plan for using us in a different way. I think the more we tell our kids those things, the more it reinforces even in our minds. The more we look back and we see God work in our lives, it helps us deal with our present. Sometimes when we're presently going through struggles and we wonder, why did this person die? Or why did this person get cancer? Or why is this happening to me? Why are these things happening? I think the answer is, I'll tell you, I was driving with Garnet Baker, and Garnet is now 95, and we're going down to see his son. I'll make it short. His son has cancer. And Garnet said, I stopped a long time ago asking God why. Because God has his reasons, and it's not my business to figure out why. He knows what's best, and so I don't ask him that. And I was just listening to him. He said, but I do ask God what? In other words, this has happened. God, you know why. I don't know why. But now what do you want me to do with this? What am I supposed to do at this point? And that's just stuck out to me this last week. Maybe that helps you. There's a lot of reasons why I want to ask why. Maybe we shouldn't ask why. What we do know is God is all-knowing. He does have his reasons. But let's see him clearly work in our lives and in the lives of others. Hope you have a good week.